And so that's been the biggest shift, I think. Making it real. It's not just about writing a shiny new policy. It's about people across the organisation building a better understanding, embedding more consistent practice, and also being able to evidence that impact that we're making as well. At the heart of it, really, as well, it's about getting value for the public pound. When resources are really tight, every pound has to work smarter, it has to work harder.
The Powering Procurement podcast is brought to you by Atomis, source to contract software designed to save you time and money. Hello and welcome to Powering Procurement, a podcast by Atomis, where we unpack the world of procurement and supply chain management with the help of industry leaders. I'm your host, Sian Lloyd, and this is our resident expert, Gareth Birch.
Hi, after 20 years in procurement, I may be billed as an expert, but believe me, I'm here to learn too.
Each episode, together with our expert guests, we'll dive into specific challenges and opportunities facing the procurement industry today.
And we'll explore easy wins and longer-term strategies to help you rise to the challenge of driving value through your work while showcasing the power of procurement.
So let's get going. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Powering Procurement. Today's guest is someone who sits right at the intersection of procurement, policy, and social impact. Olivia Hughes joined Liverpool City Council in January 2025 as Social Value Manager, where she leads a transformative programme designed to maximise social value through the council's commissioning and procurement activities. With more than a decade of experience spanning both the public and private sectors, Olivia brings a wealth of expertise in embedding social value into strategic operations. Prior to her current role, Olivia served as Head of Social Value and Procurement at a private consultancy firm, working with a range of clients including local authority, social housing providers and private sector, mainly within the decarbonisation and retrofit sector. For many years, she also worked in the Welsh public sector as Lead Social Value Development Officer at Flintshire County Council, where she played a key role in shaping and delivering social value policy and its implementation. So, with a background that spans local government, consultancy, bid management and supplier engagement, she brings a rare end-to-end perspective on how social value really works in practice and what it takes to move from policy ambition to delivery. So welcome to the podcast, Olivia.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Really looking forward to our conversation today. And as with many of our guests on Powering Procurement, we like to understand a little bit about what you're doing now, about your role. So it would be great to hear about this role with Liverpool City Council and, particularly, I think, what social value means in practice to a local authority like yours.
Thank you. I've got to say as well, Sian, as someone that's born and raised in North Wales, I'm naturally a big fan. So this is definitely a pinch me moment. So thanks for having me on. Sorry, back to the question. I started my role as Social Value Manager for Liverpool City Council in early 2025. So I've been there a year, which has absolutely flown by. I'm based within the procurement and contract service. So my role really is about driving transformational change, a programme that will help us to maximise social value through the council's commission and procurement activity. So I'm essentially the guardian as well of our social value policy. So making sure that it's applied consistently and compliantly as well, and then also leading on that implementation. This year we've taken on the really ambitious task of developing a brand new social value policy that will replace our current 2020 version. So it'll be modern, it'll be aligned with new legislation and best practice, and also shaped around our local priorities and needs. So it's been a significant piece of work, lots of careful drafting, lots of planning and engagement to make sure that it was co-designed and that it was meaningful and realistically and something that genuinely connected with our people and our communities and suppliers and officers and all of the other stakeholders that will connect with it as well. In terms of social value in practice, for me, it's exactly that. It's practice. It's not a buzzword or something aspirational that just sits on a shelf. It's a real shift in mindset. It means putting social value at the heart of all of our decision making. It's that golden thread that we weave through everything, so that it's meaningful, so that it's measurable impact into the way that we work, so that we drive real and meaningful change for our people and communities. So, to summarise, it's about us doing even more and doing it with real purpose as well.
That's really great to hear. And Olivia, it's really lovely to meet you, because actually I'm in North Wales at the moment. So I'm sitting in Wrexham, not far from you, actually, in Liverpool, just across the border. So really great to chat. And picking up straight away with what you were talking about, what you're doing there at Liverpool, obviously that golden thread, that it is meaningful, that it's all about the practice, not something that just sits on a shelf, sort of leads me really, I think, to around that thought that, social value has very much moved, hasn't it, from being that policy ambition to being an actual daily requirement now. And in terms of, perhaps you've mentioned about the new strategy, but in the way that might be changing your role as well, or the day-to-day reality of your role. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, you're right. I think there's definitely been a shift. When social value first appeared, you could arguably say that it had potential to be something that could just sit in the background. And a lot of that, I think, was because it was new and people didn't really fully understand it. And nationally as well, I don't think there was a huge amount of guidance either on how to actually practically deliver it. And we're talking back in 2012 when the Public Services Social Value Act came about. So some organisations adopted it really quickly and others needed a little bit more time, which is pretty normal for something that needs real culture shift. So I'd say now social value is a clear delivery requirement, and those expectations are much higher. That does shape my day-to-day role. It gives it a lot more visibility. It gives it stature and profile. And one thing I would always say is that a social value role in local government is incredibly cross-cutting. You work with so many different stakeholders, from senior management teams to political leaders, frontline teams, partners, everyone really. It's not just a procurement thing, it touches on everything. So you end up knowing quite a lot of people, and you also get a really unique viewpoint of how everything sort of like molds and fits together. And when I first came across social value, it was back in 2014. So it was just after the Public Services Social Value Act. And I think there's even been a shift from there. So when it first appeared, it's sort of even called community benefit. So there was lots of different names for it as well. So I was working in Wales at the time as well. So we had that different name for it. It's called community benefit. So there was a lot of confusion around it as well. So fast forward, I think, to now, with the increased policy focus, it's brought a lot more accountability, which is obviously super positive. It pushes us beyond just that ambition and into real delivery. And that's really important because policies only matter if they're actually deliverable as well. So I'm a doer, so that's my mindset. It comes naturally. And so that's been the biggest shift, I think, making it real. It's not just about writing a shiny new policy. It's about people across the organisation building a better understanding, embedding more consistent practice, and also being able to evidence that impact that we're making as well. At the heart of it, really, as well, it's about getting value for the public pound. When resources are really tight, every pound has to work smarter, it has to work harder. So that shift from ambition to requirement has definitely made my role much more hands-on, outcome focused, And honestly, who has the real power, that superpower in what it delivers and not just what it promises.
Really interesting, Olivia, what you were saying there as well about social value and sort of the terminology around it and how it's evolved and people's understanding of it has evolved. It'd be really good to get your thoughts on how central you think actually procurement is and this industry in terms of delivering social value for communities, local communities.
Yeah, sure. I think from my perspective, procurement is absolutely central to delivering really meaningful social value. And in fact, I'd say it's one of the biggest opportunities that we have in local government to drive real change, that sort of tangible, palpable change in our communities. So when you think about really that scale of expenditure on goods, works and services in the public sector, everything it takes to sustain our communities and support residents, it's colossal, it's enormous. And we know that no matter how much we spend, financial constraints will always mean that we can't go as far as we'd like. And I think that's why procurement becomes such a powerful strategic lever. It gives us that way to make every pound, as I talked about earlier, work smarter and harder and with real purpose. In terms of social value, we define it as having two sides. So the first is inherent social value, so that social value that is already happening through contracts, so like a social care contract, for example. And with the right thinking and good commissioning design, we can enhance that value, create more impact, and do it without additional cost. And then there's also the added value. So the social value requirements that we build into our procurement processes that suppliers are then scored and weighted on. So that's how we can directly influence and shape that, our social, economic, environmental, and even cultural value as well. So for me, procurement sits right at the heart of social value delivery. If we use it really, really well, it becomes an integral strategic driver that helps us to go much further than our financial resources could ever do on their own. And it's where ambition meets real world delivery. And I think that's why it matters so much.
And we've heard on the podcast some describing, that there are challenges and it can be a balancing act. I think that's a term that's been used in the past, particularly in terms of, when procurement teams are trying to balance commercial outcomes with social value commitments. I mean, have you got any experience or examples around that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's a good question because I think it puts spotlight on the challenges, because procurement teams in the public sector really do sit at that sort of center of that balancing act on the scales between sort of commercial outcomes and social value, and it isn't easy. It really isn't. There's a lot of challenges. Similar to private sector, but that environment that we operate in is far more regulated. It's politically visible. We're scrutinised politically and publicly. So the scope of the challenges is a huge one. We're often dealing with financial constraints, limited capacity, tight deadlines, sometimes procuring essential frontline services at real pace to meet those immediate needs of our communities. And there can be large volumes of procurement as well going through at any one time, and funding as well that needs to be used quickly. And as I've said, decisions are open to political and public scrutiny. So that naturally is going to create caution. And I think it can mean procurement teams, not just here, but nationally across all local government, can maybe be accused or be seen as working in sort of like a procurement textbook rather than testing out new approaches or innovating. And now we've got the new Procurement Act and policy statement. It is going to, I hope, give us additional flexibility to do things in a different way that's going to mean that we get greater outcomes. But obviously it's going to take time to adopt and to test. But I'm confident this will bring a big change for procurement teams and give them more confidence and give them more ability to play outside of that textbook and be creative and be innovative in this space, which all sort of comes together within social value as well. It gives us a greater ability to do more. So I think in that kind of environment, social value can be seen as well as slowing things down. So it might stretch the timetable, add complexity, or create barriers for suppliers who might already sort of find the public procurement sector quite challenging. So the balance really becomes about making good, informed decisions and doing that on a contract by contract basis. And just to sort of summarize, for me, that's where that strong assessment comes in. We, as a local authority, look carefully at whether and how social value can be included in a procurement process in a way that is relevant, in a way that's proportionate and practical, but also meaningful. So there's something that is really genuine that can come out of it. So we're not just ticking a box. That may create unintended consequences as well. So, for example, that means things like looking at the market conditions, how mature is it, how competitive is it, where the costs align with budget, as well as supplier capability in the market, what's the contract value, the duration. So there's lots and lots of things that we need to look at when we're making that fair assessment. And that's exactly as well why we promote so much and we talk so much around outcomes around social value being linked with early planning and design, and engagement is critical as well. Stakeholder engagement, which also includes pre-market engagement, understanding our markets, talking to our stakeholders up front where possible, so that we can understand the needs, the gaps, the opportunities, without sort of destabilizing the procurement process. Sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent, but I hope that answered the question somewhat.
Yeah, no, it did. Don't worry. It absolutely did. It took me actually in a few different directions, because at the start of your answer, I was thinking very much about what you were saying about the communities. And of course, with being a local authority, you really deliver a wide range of services to a wide range of different communities. And quite often that sort of procurement element, it's not visible to those people, is it, who are effectively the end user, but the impact of that sort of good procurement social value would certainly be felt by them. And then you also were bringing obviously your supply relationship in there and how important that is. And we do hear, that there can be a difference in understanding about the importance of social value and engagement with that. But I presume that, that can separate organisations and suppliers really in terms of the extent that they do engage with social value, really.
Yeah, definitely. From sort of a supplier perspective, I think that biggest differentiator is understanding. It's understanding, not just understanding social value as a concept, but really understanding what it looks like in practice on the ground, on the cold face of it. So I think that any supplier has the capability to engage with social value, but I think the ones that struggle are often the ones that haven't yet connected with the theory of the reality of it, which is that sort of like practical doing on the ground. So I think the organisations that really sort of like stand out are the ones that have done their homework, that take the time to really understand the client, so our client requirements, the local context, the sort of legislative that we have to comply with. So getting in sort of like the client's head a little bit, putting themselves in the client's shoes, and also understanding sort of like the priorities of the areas that we operate in as well. So understanding residents, understanding communities and the challenges that face them. So they're coming in bid ready, not just with a generic statement of sort of intent, but with a genuine insight about thought about where they can add value. And I think experience as well plays a big part in it too, because suppliers who have delivered social value before have seen the impact of their work. So they tend to approach it with a different level of commitment because it means something. They've seen it happen. They've felt that touch. Is super positive, and they want to do more. They want to help create more, and it's something that's really motivating. It's inspiring. It's like infectious. You want to keep doing more of it. I think the other side of it as well is that it's not sort of like one size fits all as well. So I think different organisations also bring in different strengths. So you could argue that SMEs and VCSEs, for example, are deeply rooted in those communities. So they naturally have sort of like an advantage because they understand the local landscape, sometimes more naturally than larger organisations. And they're often already delivering social value in informal ways. So their challenge isn't willingness, it's often capacity and resource against larger organisations. So for me, what separates sort of suppliers isn't sort of size or sector, it's mindset. Those that really sort of engage tend to be curious, they tend to be open and proactive, and like I've said, grounded in that sort of like real experience. They see social value as something that is integral to their business, so it's how they do business essentially. So it's not something that is challenging because they already do it. It's something that they do day to day, and they don't struggle. They don't struggle to apply that to working with us on a new contract. It's not a new concept. It's, as I've said, it's grounded in who they are and how they practice.
Yeah, that's really great insight, I think, and really good tips and advice there as well for our listeners to the podcast. You mentioned, Olivia, earlier, I think, obviously, scrutiny, accountability. In terms then of measuring social value, that's key, isn't it? In being able to evidence what you're delivering there. How do you actually approach that measurement and monitoring an evidence-based approach?
Yeah, you're right. At Liverpool, we use the TOMS framework, so that stands for National Themes, Outcomes and Measures, and that gives us a consistent structure and draws on credible national data sources like the national government, HM Treasury, the Green Book, and then also I think it brings in the unit cost database. But don't ask me anything more.
That's enough. Don't worry.
The ins and outs that go on with those, because I think it's pretty complex. But they assign a financial proxy value to certain social value activities. So it could be, for example, creating a new job, and it will showcase what that financial or fiscal value is to society as a result of that person getting employed, for example. So the strength of the TOMS really is that it allows us to regulate, it allows us to evaluate bids fairly so that we can compare like for like, or apples with apples, apples with pears. So suppliers know the rules essentially, and we've got a transparent score and methodology as well. So for procurement, we have to make sure there's that consistency. It's essential. But the TOMS is just one part of the picture. It is very transactional. It tells you what's been delivered, but not necessarily what difference that it's made. And I think that's the one sort of no criticism of it. And I think that's where the real challenge lies. For example, if a supplier as I said, early offers a new job. The question I always ask is, well, so what? Did those jobs lead to sustainable employment, or was it a case of it was a short duration contract? They're employed for a very short term, and actually it's ended up doing more harm than good because it wasn't sustainable, and they've now been left unemployed. Did the individual actually benefit from it? Or, as I've said, was that unintended consequences? So I think that's the nuance we don't always capture through quantitative frameworks alone, like the TOMS. And that's a wider challenge in the public sector because so much of what we procure is short term or can be short term. And our capacity and resources don't always allow us to track medium to long term impact either, and that's complicated. It's really complex to measure impact as well. So we end up measuring sort of like activity, outputs, and outcomes rather than meaningful change. One thing we're really committed to though through the new policy that I mentioned earlier is really strengthening this. So moving towards a more a balanced approach, but also building in more qualitative insight where we can. So understanding that lived-in experience, understanding outcomes, and understanding that impact where we can beyond just sort of like those fiscal numbers. So for me, measurement is about blending both of those worlds. So the structure and comparability that frameworks like the TOMS give us, but also that deeper, more human understanding of what social value actually achieves in people's lives, and that's the direction that we're aiming for in the new policy that will hopefully be endorsed at the end of this month.
I'm sure that will resonate with, many listeners, and, it's great to hear you focus on what you are doing, but where you feel, more can be done, or whether there are, potential gaps. Do you think digital tools can potentially help with this? I mean, we hear quite often on the podcast, obviously, the importance of data and getting that data gathered and digested, really.
Yeah, I mean, digital tools and procurement systems are naturally really important, especially in the public sector, where we've got to ensure transparency and accuracy. And as I've said, the challenge around sort of public and political scrutiny, we have to make sure that we're reporting transparently. And that we've got a consistent way to track and manage and report against social value as well. But I always say, because I was asked this question not long ago actually as well, that a system is only ever as good as the information that goes into it. So the technology isn't the hard part. The hard part is about getting the foundations right to begin with, so stripping all of that away and really like homing in on what the foundations are. So that means knowing exactly what we want to report on, making sure everyone understands it, and giving the right guidance, the right training and support so they feel confident using any digital system properly. Because without that, even with the best tool in the world, it's not going to give you meaningful data because people are not using it, they're not engaging with it, they're not interacting with it. So as I was talking about the policy earlier, again, within our new policy, we're looking to really strengthen validation. And what I mean by sort of validation is ensuring that for suppliers that have said that they've delivered against a contractual social value commitment, for example, say they've said that they're going to again hire someone, and that they are providing credible evidence so that we're able to validate that and then be able to be confident in our reporting publicly. And that way, again, is through those transparent sort of like conversations, and again we're setting expectations up front then as well, so suppliers know what evidence will be needed and there's not going to be sort of any surprises later on. So I've digressed slightly, but yes, digital tools do play a crucial role, but I think it's part of a much bigger picture. The real impact comes in good design, foundations, essentially, clear expectations, quality data, and strong relationships with people that are delivering the work, and also those that are going to be inputting onto the digital platform as well, to make sure that we've got strong and reliable data.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Relationships being key there, as well, as you were saying, something we hear so important within procurement. I'll take you a little bit wider now, Olivia, just to sort of draw back, because obviously we're really appreciative of the leaders that we get on the podcast, and we get some fantastic insight and experience shared. We know that there have been changes to public procurement regulations. We've heard from the Cabinet Office themselves. They've been on and talking about it with us. In terms of how that's perhaps changed the perception or the way social value is seen by local government, how would you assess that?
Yeah, I think the changes to public procurement are, in terms of the Act and the policy statement, are still really new. So I think we're still in that sort of transition period and that sort of like phase of testing and learning and finding our feet with it. So and I think that's probably reflective across across the public sector nationally. But I think even at this early stage, it's clear that they're giving us more flexibility, and that's a really positive shift for social value. With the new regime, it does open the door for us being able to do things differently. There's more space to innovate, to be creative and try different methods, sort of outside of the previous rules. So that's definitely going to have, or has already had, an effect on social value. We're not just talking about sort of like that added value either, that's scored and weighted. We're also talking about sort of the wider outcomes that we can influence through good design, and also sort of like inclusivity, accessibility, and also reducing barriers for SMEs and VCSEs as well. So those organisations that they often bring their own social value naturally, simply because of the way that they operate and their connection to communities. So anything that helps to diversify the supply chain instantly as well strengthens social value outcomes. Those organisations, sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. So
All right.
I think I was going to say I went to it's something that just popped up into my head, because I went to Procure Act last year, and I know you were talking about Lindsay Maguire, because I'd looked at her podcast from this series, and she's obviously from the Cabinet Office, and she was at Procure Act last year. And some of the case studies that she was sharing really struck with me. So like the council that allowed video tender submissions, and Lindsay was also talking around sort of an example, and this sticks with me. It was an example around a tree surgery contract that she was talking about from one of the local authorities wanting to procure a tree surgery contract, and where bidders did a live demonstration instead of submitting a lengthy written response. So they went to a site and they were asked to fell a tree, as they would, and they were making the assessments around, health and safety and lots of other qualitative aspects. And I found that really fascinating, because it just shows what's possible when we step away from more traditional processes, and it reduces barriers, making things more inclusive, and gives a far sort of like clearer sense of quality than potentially a written method statement could ever do as well. And then you've also got sort of like challenges around AI now as well, and that supporting, or strengthening suppliers' qualitative responses, which is it's a tool there, to be used. And I don't know across the board, other public sectors have policies around the use of AI and so on and so forth, but I just thought that was a fascinating case study, and I think that's come from the update of the Act, and also the policy statement as well. So it's really exciting that there's the opportunity to be a bit more creative. And I think naturally that's going to support us with getting greater social value outcomes through commissioning activity.
Yeah. And it's always great to hear those real stories, isn't it? The case studies, it always just brings something to life. And it can also just spark that bit of inspiration as well with sharing something like that. So thanks for bringing that to our podcast today as well. And to hear about it from you was brilliant. I suppose just perhaps a final thought on this one from you before a couple of closing questions. In terms of any advice you might have for leaders around now, being better prepared for the value of social value in public sector procurement?
Yeah, sure. I think for procurement leaders who want to be ready for the future of social value, I mean, it's here, it's now, it's been around for a long time now. But I think the first thing is investing in dedicated resource. So having someone within the organisation whose job it is full time to lead on it, someone who brings passion, they bring energy and clarity. That makes a massive difference because they're going to also bring ownership and accountability to make sure there's compliance, but it's also deliverable as well. You really need a champion who can bring everyone along on that journey. But that can't sit in isolation either. I think you also need leadership buy-in, both from senior management teams and also politically, where that commitment is visible at the top, and it naturally sort of like flows through the organization. And that's what really helps to shift culture throughout the organization, sort of like that top-down approach. And I think that sort of social value becomes part of how people think then, because it's that culture shift and not something extra that just sits on the side and no one's accountable for. So I do think having investing in someone is really, really key. But then also echoing the message that although it's one person's full-time role to support with compliance and delivery, social value is everyone's job. It's everyone's role to create it, to be the guardians of it, to be champions of it. But that just takes time, and it takes, as I've said, that culture shift. And that's why you need leadership buy-in to make sure those messages resonate and are heard.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant advice there, Olivia. I'm going to ask you whether you've actually had any surprises while in local government in terms of, you're working in social value, working in procurement. Have there been any surprises for you so far?
I think what surprised me honestly is how the world looks when you've sat on both sides of the table. So before I joined the public sector, all of my experience was in the private sector in either consultancy roles or as a supplier myself. So I was the person that was writing all the bids. I was delivering the social value on the ground. So I was going in schools and delivering careers talks and things like that. Really trying to interpret what the client actually wanted. I didn't get it at all. And I remember all of it, the complexity of it, the pressure, the barriers. I remember being up at 3:00 in the morning writing bids. And actually back then as well, there was no sort of like digital system. So it was all sort of printing, hand binding and delivering it to local authorities. So I've been on that side of it. So stepping away into the public sector gave me I think, an incredibly valuable perspective. It really helped me to understand how to shape approaches that didn't feel like a tick box exercise, that didn't feel difficult for the supplier, and something that they could genuinely engage with, and also feel like they could almost get an advantage if they engaged with it properly. Um, so discovering sort of like this other side, this client side, that was probably the biggest surprise of all. So I suddenly saw things as in um, the regulations, the legislation, the scrutiny, the political environment, the pace, and the sheer level of responsibility, really. So it helped me to see those pressures and the care that has to go into decision making. And so instead of feeling sort of daunted by that, I found it super exciting. Loved bringing my commercial sort of solutions focused mindset into a space where I felt like I could make a real difference. So I think that dual perspective, seeing the whole picture from both ends, has really shaped everything about how I personally work today. And it's made me more empathetic and more balanced, and also more determined to design processes that feel human and are genuinely deliverable. As I've said, I'm definitely a doer. I've got a doer mindset, and I really want to make sure that everything that we do as a local authority definitely can be delivered, and it's not just ambition. So I think that's probably the biggest surprise I had, was just generally going into the public sector and understanding all the challenges.
Well, you've final question. You've part answered, I think, in that one, because we're here to inspire the next generation, perhaps thinking about going into procurement as a career, while recognizing the challenges for the sector, like so many sectors, around retention and recruitment. So our final one to our guests is always to ask them to share about what's actually made you happy that you have chosen a career in procurement. I mean, your passion for it certainly shines through, and your never-ending drive to also keep improving has shone through the podcast as well. But how would you sum up where you are and why you're happy you did choose it?
Yeah, I mean, I did. Just to be clear, I didn't choose procurement. It definitely wasn't something that was talked about in school. Even after doing a business degree, I don't think I could have confidently explained even what it was or what a job might look like in procurement. But I sort of fell into it, as I've said, from sort of supplier side. I was in bid management, and then went client side into sort of the procurement aspect. So I fell into it, and something just clicked. I don't deliver procurements naturally myself, but I do see my role as a huge part of the team, being that strategic sort of support arm. And over the years, I've built a strong understanding of how things work and how they fit together, even without sort of like a textbook definition. I think actually not coming from a traditional route has actually been one of the biggest strengths, really, because it's made me more comfortable in asking, why are we doing things like this? Can we do things in a better way? Always questioning things, probably being a bit of a nuisance, really. Um, and I think that's because I've come from the private sector and have had that sort of like plethora of different roles, and bringing that sort of like commercial head, which I think is an incredible useful skill to have in the public sector, that commercial thinking. So that's something I think I love about procurement. It's fast paced, it's creative, it's innovative, it lets you problem solve, think commercially, bring ideas to life, all of that stuff that keeps me super excited. But I do think that there is a really personal side for me. I think I've always been, I know you touched on it, passionate, but I'm also a really benevolent person at heart. I really want to make a difference. I want to help people to thrive and feel like my work is making a genuine difference and that it matters. So I think that's really important to me. So working in the public sector where those values come together, it's always a place where it's felt like home, and it's where my sort of professional purpose and personal purpose has met. So I'm super happy that I've ended up here. It definitely wasn't part of the plan, I think, going back many years ago when I was leaving school and university, but I'm hopeful that I can look back at my career one day and feel really, really proud of what I was part of. And for me, that's about making change, making meaningful, positive change that really genuinely affects people's lives for the better. So yeah.
And really inspiring to hear, Olivia. And like so many of our guests, have fallen into it, quite frankly. So I think you're amongst a super band of people when you say that. And thank you for being so open as well in your conversation and sharing so much with us today. It's been absolutely fascinating chatting with you. We wish you all the best with, of course, the rest of your career. Many years of changing lives and doing more yet to come, I'm sure, from you. And of course, to everybody who's been listening to the podcast, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget, you can listen to our other episodes wherever you find your podcasts, and we will be back with another Powering Procurement very soon.
That wraps up this episode of Powering Procurement. We hope you enjoyed that as much as we did.
Visit our website at atomis.co.uk or follow us on LinkedIn to continue the conversation.
Remember to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you choose to listen.
Thanks for joining us, and see you next time on Powering Procurement.